And today's panel is essentially, we call it When Art Meets Science, and it could translate to various topics. When it comes to UA, the reason we chose this topic is since today we have 2.7 apps that compete for our users' attention every day, and us as marketeers, we need to basically use both sides of the brain to get those users into our products. And what we're going to talk about today, we have pretty much, with Steve's experience as well, almost half a centuries of experience accumulated in the room. And basically what we want to do, guys, maybe you guys want to introduce yourself. Maybe Nasrin, you go first. And
okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Sorry about my Dothraki style voice today. So I got a cold, during the long weekend, the best experience I can ever have. But thank you for coming to this panel. And I'm Nasrin. I'm from Playstack. Playstack is a publisher. We publish a mobile game and also console game. And I'm very happy to be here to share my experience for UA. So welcome to join us. Thank you.
Hey all, I'm Kerem, doing UA for Gram Games for almost 4 years now. Gram Games is a gaming company. We started as hyper-casual gaming company. Now, with the success of Merge Dragons, we switched to IAP games.
I'm Mark Beck, the CMO of Tripledot Studios. So we're a gaming developer and publisher company here in London. We're also hiring, so if you know any marketing talent that is interested, please let me know. Our largest game is Solitaire, so I think we're about the 4th largest Solitaire game. We also have a Sudoku app, a word game called Word Hop that just went live, and a blocks game as well.
And I'm apparently the oldest person on the panel. I'm Steve Fowler. I run marketing and publishing for FoxNext Games. If you don't know FoxNext Games, it was the gaming division for Fox until Disney bought Fox, and now I'm technically a Disney employee. They won't give me business cards, so I don't really know who I work for anyways. We did launch Marvel Strikeforce last year in March, big hit for us. We have 4 development studios. Our second game is in beta in Canada and New Zealand called Storyscape, interactive narrative storytelling game with both original IP and some Fox IP. There's Titanic stories in it and X-Files stories in it. Our third game will be going into beta this summer based on the Avatar license from James Cameron. It's a mobile core strategy game. And a 4th game in development on the Aliens license.
thanks for sharing. And first question for today is, given that this is a wide topic, Steve, maybe we start with you. What does art and science mean to you?
Well, in UA, there's an extremely literal version of this, which is we use science for ad buying and placement, and we put art in front of customers. So probably the most simple place to start is we have artists and we have data scientists that need to figure out how to talk to each other, people that are left brain, right brain that need to figure out how to come to an agreement. Sometimes that's challenging. There are unique conversations that happen where it seems like they don't speak the same language, and hopefully you've got good marketers in the middle there, brand marketers, someone that is more intimate with the customer, that can help originate the idea for UA. So Marvel Strikeforce is a little bit easier since it's a fairly well-established license. Most people know what Spider-Man looks like. But how do you translate what our game is with Spider-Man was kind of one of the big challenges. So, starting the very literal is we make art, we put it in front of people that we believe will be interested in it through highly sophisticated platforms and targeting and algorithms, and we hope that science makes the art sing for us.
I don't know if I would describe our Solitaire apps as art, but I mean they're certainly beautiful to me, I guess. The science behind it as well is, I think it's depending on your scale and depending on your size. So we used to work for a much larger company, controlling much larger budgets, much larger active user bases. When you're a smaller company, you're actually just trying to run experiments to try to improve. So this is the key for us, is just continual improvements. So, we have a hypothesis that our game is working because of this, or our ad creative is working because of this, and then we kind of iterate on that process. So as far as like the science behind it, I think, strictly like data scientists, you're talking about, statistically significant periods, enough data. This is something that, smaller companies, you can still do, but it's a much smaller kind of basis than a raw scientific approach to something. So our biggest thing is coming up with hypothesis and then trying to challenge that hypothesis or improve on that hypothesis. That's kind of key for us.
So we look things a little bit differently. Science is the system to acquire knowledge, and art is kind of how you express that knowledge and experience to the work. So when we talk about UA, it's kind of science, we get at the data, it's our BI tools, and art is how we create solutions for the daily obstacles we face. So it's not just for us creative assets or something, which every obstacle brings us another issue that we need to fix. With data, with art, we came up with creative solutions. With data, we check if it makes sense, and we can make data-driven decisions.
So I agree with all the gentlemen. Yeah, to me, if we put it very simple, science is basically like Jon Snow, and the art are his ladies. I mean, the ladies he met. So basically, if you like Jon Snow, you know nothing, you don't know your data, then no matter what kind of ladies you met, you won't make any good chemistry. Yeah. So basically, we have to know your data. You have to know your data. All the single small data can bring you very big impact, including the format, including the click-through rate, conversion rate, all kinds of data nowadays are very important. So you have to look into the details. And the creatives as the same, because nowadays it changed so fast. So from playable ad, from the static ad, nowadays the video ad is the most important one. You have to know what kind of genre you are in and what kind of ad creatives works the best for you. So for me, you have to mix both of the two to bring you the best performance. Yeah.
I love the example of the Game of Thrones, and given that we just finished the last season, and the next question was about the trend that we have in terms of art and science. So I imagine Game of Thrones started like 7, 8 years ago. So what would you say the difference when you did media buying back in 4, 5, 6 years ago and today? How would you co art and science then?
Yes. I always like this example of myself. When I was back, I was from Taiwan, and I was in Taiwan. I actually started with one of my friends to start a gaming company, very, very tiny one, in 2010. And when I just launched that game, I loved that time because whatever we launch, wow, boom, it goes to the top 10 charts so easily. Even it's just a simulation for the dogs sound like quack, 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 quack. We go on the top one because people think it's silly and it's just fun to have it. But nowadays it's so difficult to boost your game like that, like 10 years ago or something. So I think for nowadays we really need to look into what's the trend, like what Shay just mentioned. We have to, nowadays, playable, as I just mentioned, now it's very, very popular for a hyper-casual game. But if you're a strategy game, you might need to rethink, is it really suitable for your game? Because dependent on different network, it will totally bring you totally different result. Because so many people are talking about playable games, but maybe not every game is suitable for playable. And for videos as well, nowadays, when you can see how people swipe their game so fast, we actually check on the data on Facebook. The average video viewing seconds is around only 3 seconds. So if you invest a lot of money on a long video, 30 seconds or even longer ones, then they might not even watch them. Only 3 seconds, they will decide if they want to click or not. Yeah, but of course, there are still some networks, like video networks, they still love the longer videos. That's also a fact. So try to understand also which genre you are in and really rethink what your competitors are doing. It's actually very important. A lot of people from our experience as a publisher, we are reached by a lot of developers, and especially the small ones. But when the first time they approached us, they actually didn't think about what kind of things like creatives they can really present to the players. Because the first thing the players can see is not your game. It's the creatives, the UA, if you do UA, I mean. Yeah, so that's the first thing. So you have to think what's your unique selling point nowadays, what you can compete with other competitors. Is there already a lot of competitors in the market, and then can you beat them or not? And if not, do you want to redesign your game? There are a lot of things you have to think about it. So that's nowadays that's the trend, and also different market has different trend as well. For example, in APAC nowadays, the more like heromatic and like wall theme or like fairy tale, this kind of style is very popular in China, but maybe that's not popular in the West. So you have to localize culturally as well. That's for the local for the trend. That's what I've learned recently.
So, like 5 years ago, the problem was the same, actually. We were trying to reach the right audience with what we have. So, what trends change from 5 years ago? For example, we have more black box networks now, Facebook, Google, etc. We were dealing with pub-level optimization more than anything else 5 years ago. Nowadays, we don't have this opportunity, so we have to focus on something else. For example, app event optimization. We have to find an event to optimize. It's not just purchase or something. We have to be more creative. If we can find a better event, better than purchase, which is related to purchase as well, which has higher sample size, we can increase our volume. As well as creatives are more important nowadays, because to reach the right audience, one of the tools we have are the creatives. Creatives define the audience, actually, which you can analyze every aspect of the creators and check which kind of audience you have in your game comes from that creative, and trying to do A/B tests in the videos or banners, changing the aspects and see the results, what kind of audience you are getting back. So each time when there's a new trend, there's a new issue that you need to solve, and science and art helps. It's the balance helps you to solve it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty comprehensive. I guess the only thing I would say from 8 years ago is it's obviously a lot more competitive now. So the way that you can apply science is because you have learnings. It doesn't work otherwise. So, 8 years ago, bringing in a few thousand users or even a few thousand clicks to check if the ad creative was working was significantly cheaper than it was now. So now you kind of have to go. Back then you could kind of churn and burn, learn kind of thing. Now you have to really come in with a more strategic, this is what we think, here's 2 creatives, let's split them down the middle and see which one is statistically significant in terms of its performance. So I think for me that's the major thing. I think also we touched on kind of ad units, but 8 years ago there was more tricks in sub-publish optimization, bidding optimization, ranking position, these kind of hacks that probably are no longer effective, at least most of them. So it really limits what you can be optimizing, and I think your bid, your creative, your sources, your app store maybe, these are the key things you need to get right and focus on making sure that you're running tests on all of those things.
Yeah, probably the only thing to add, you guys covered a lot there, is the thing I've noticed most is creative and how long creative lasts and the volume of creative that we need to build to keep fresh in the market. We could probably 5 or 8 years ago get away with one set of creative that worked for the West entirely for, let's say, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And now my marketing art team is doing 5 to 10 completely new creative campaigns per week that we then test, and I'd say 70% of those fail and don't move on for broad distribution, and we've got to do that again next week. And so just the volume of creative is something that I've noticed my teams have to scale up to be able to support, because there's just so much noise in the market, and because customers are so fickle now. You mentioned 3-second view times on Facebook for video. You need something that stands out, and it's tough to find, and you have to use the science to tell you whether it's any good or not. You can't just gut check it anymore.
Thanks for the insights. And when it comes to your products, Steve, sorry to bring up the experience bit again. You've been in a lot of product, let's call it life cycles, early stage, mid stage, later stages. Any tips, recommendations of how to cope art and science during those stages?
Well, you know, as an app matures, it goes from a UA perspective. At the very beginning, it's all about maximizing those what we call golden cohort folks. So from beta and through the first 3-4 months, you want to capture these users that you will never get again, the folks that will stay the longest, that will spend the most, and so there are techniques and kind of analyses that you use for that kind of honeymoon period, if you will. And then as the game matures into the first year or two, you're trying to stabilize out and really get a cadence of how many people do you need to bring in, ROI positive, really drilling down on ROAS. We only optimize against yield for new player acquisitions for Marvel Strikeforce, for instance. And as it becomes an elder game, you need to start thinking about how much of your spend and effort goes to retargeting, reacquisition campaigns, driving monetization of the current players that are in the game through external spends beyond just what you can have inside the game. So, you know, it's generally kind of how you think of paid advertising spend over time.
Yeah, I think kind of the fundamentals of UA stay pretty similar. You're trying to acquire users profitably, so the creative that you're using, the kind of testing you're doing for the creative, this stays the same. The kind of next stage in the funnel is, you know, retention and conversion. And I think as your game hopefully gets larger and you're in this kind of life cycle curve, you start having to think more about the changes that you make in the game, how they affect your existing user base more than your new users coming in. So if you're starting an app, you know, it's easy to change their first user experience. You can make it more difficult, you can make it easier. This is, you know, reasonably straightforward. But when you have an existing user base, this obviously gets much more complicated because you have to satisfy the players that are already playing as well. So, yeah, I'd just say your focus kind of shifts as the game matures from just, you know, raw UA pretty much always, if you can buy profitably, you should. But then the in-game mechanisms, your focus goes from kind of early funnel metrics to late retention, late conversion. Yeah.
So, like at the beginning, at the soft-line stage, you don't have much data. So you come up with hypotheses, theories that you want to prove. So you can come up with a lot of creative ideas, a lot of things, but which you don't know is what you're acquiring actually. You don't have enough data to analyze everything, every audience. When we come to fatigue stage, you have a lot of data, but you don't have creative solutions, that many creative solutions anymore because you tested a lot of things. I can give an example of merge dragons. For example, we know that if we use dragons on the videos, we see lower ROAS, so those players stick in the game less. Or at a soft launch game, what we have, Merge Kingdom, we are trying new kind of videos to acquire different kind of audiences. When we use fighting part, ROAS is much better, conversion rate is much higher, but IPM is lower. When we casualize the video, it's kind of IPM is much higher, but the conversion rate in the game is much lower. So it's kind of a balance.
Thank you. I agree with the gentlemen. And as a publisher, we usually communicate with our developer saying for the product journey, usually we have 3 steps. The first one is the tech launch. So during the tech launch, you have to work closely with your science team because, data team, because as Kerem just mentioned, we don't have enough data or any data to do anything. So we need some background checking from your data team to understand which market you should go first and to actually, because for tech launch, you have to tick all the box to see if your KPIs, if your retention is all good enough to go to the next stage. So you might need to go somewhere with a cheaper CPI. Then your data team might help you with that, and also to see what kind of your art style of your game will be suitable. Is it for Asia or is it for Western? That's all. It will give you a significant impact on your CPI. And then the next stage would be soft launch. So during soft launch, once you tick all the box, you think your retention is good enough, your monetization system seems okay, then you can start doing soft launch and then to see and optimize towards to your monetization and also the game content itself. And then, of course, for UA side, you have to collect more information. You have more information now, and then you will try to A/B test to see what kind of theme is better for your creatives. And at this stage, you might go to one tier 1 country, one tier 3 country to have some comparison. And then once you go all prepared, then you go to the global launch. And then before you do global launch, also need to work very closely to your data team and your creative team to, first of all, do you want to do localize? Do you have enough budget for localization? If no, can you just try the way, for example, delete all the languages, just some animations or in your video games to lower your cost? So these are a lot of things your data team can help you. Also, your art team can help you with to localize the style. For example, for Japan, if you go to creative team, creatives go to Japan, please don't really just use the Western style because they won't take it. Yeah, use more comic style, more exciting, and a lot of shining, shouting. They are all more adaptive to Japanese, yeah, and for Asian as well. So try to think about from each country, each geo for your global launch. I think that can give you more help to have better performance.
It's an awesome story. Speaking of stories, and can you give an example of a way when you really managed to grow your app using both sides of the brain? Kerem, you can start.
For us, healthy growth comes with actually science. Like BI is the key of everything because art needs to start kicking in some kind of inspiration. That inspiration comes with science actually. So at Gram Games, for example, at the early years, we start investing on our own analytics solution, which is quite useful for now. For that, even we put strict rules for the employees not to use MMP's data or data from anywhere to create an habit. So now every kind of data is available for all employees. I can see a creative's audience as well as I can see the finance data as well as levels, game habits. So any person at Gram Games can pinpoint a problem, come up with a creative solution even if they are not working on that department. So kind of BI made us all creators on that sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the creative is the most obvious because once you get that special creative that has kind of nailed the game, the marketing, the audience, then it's kind of pretty obvious that this is the one that's working significantly better than everyone else. And then applying this same creative concept to, from Facebook to Google to Snapchat to kind of rolling this similar concept but in a different ad style, I think is probably the most, at least the biggest thing I can think of at the moment. Yeah.
I think there's two big growth moments that Marvel Strikeforce went through, one is not replicable, which is, we have partnerships with Marvel and really optimize our app for movie releases. So we change out UI and we feature different characters along with the movie releases. And so that's probably not applicable, but those are always big growth moments for us. And then specifically, there was a campaign that we ran where we tried to build creative almost like trading cards, so football player cards or baseball player cards, but using Marvel superheroes. And so the creative was very kind of, hero portrait with statistics of that particular character. Miss Marvel is a tank-style character that has heavy defense and these types. And it really took off. It was double, triple what we were seeing in click-through rates, and the ROAS was really positive in that. And so we doubled and tripled down and created multiple variants of this. And obviously, we've got a big roster of characters that we can build with 80 different characters. But then we thought about using different art styles and different key mechanics of the characters to swap out in these, to the point where we ended up having we still do, 10 different variants of trading card creative that are not only optimized for Western audiences, but we then took that same idea for, let's say, Japan, where you have to be very different in your creative style. We outsourced to a local agency there to do culturalized assets in the trading card style, which also performed and grew us significantly in Japan. And then we liked the aesthetic so much of the culturalized assets that the Japanese agency we worked with did, that we deculturalized those and brought them back to Western audiences, and that refreshed a whole nother set of this just one concept that turned into hundreds and hundreds of variants.
Nasrin?
Thank you. Yeah, I remember once during my previous company, when I was working with the data team, we suddenly find out, actually the data team find out, there was a certain ad which has really, really high click-through rate. And then we tried to dig into it. We found there was actually a very shining shiny, very, very shiny blue weapon was in that ad. And then we were thinking, oh, really? Is it really that? That's the thing to... because actually we just created, it's not even in the game, it's just to increase the click-through rate. And then we talked to the team, we think, hey, can you create a shiny, blue weapon? Maybe it can really help our monetization and thing. And then they did. And then in the end, that was the best-selling weapon in the game. So you never know. Sometimes UA can help the game and game can help the UA. And also the data team, once you keep communicate with them, sometimes they can have very brilliant idea, and what they see are sometimes quite different from what we've seen, and then they can provide us some different angle and help the UA and also help the game.
Yeah, I totally agree. The game can contribute to UA and vice versa. Quick question for the audience. How many of you are currently buying media yourselves? Raise a hand. 1, 2. Not too many. Cool. So the next question is about the role of the person who buys the media, the UA manager. What kind of tools and skills you guys think are required for today's UA manager? We talk a lot about art and science. What kind of other traits are required for that person? Steve, you can start.
Well, we have a team of folks, and so there are specializations where we don't require our UA folks to do everything. So they're supported by data scientists, and they have analysts on their side. We have a creative strategist on the UA team. His role is to analyze all of the creative, all the A/B testing, to make informed decisions that then he uses as briefing for our creative services team that actually makes the art. So, you've got very left-brain people that are writing algorithmic programs and coming up with LTV curves and looking at the inputs there, and then very kind of, on the other end, still within the UA team, very creative folks that are still using data, but then managing a team of artists. And so it's a pretty diversified mix of skills, I think, to have a well-rounded UA team. Yeah,
I think that's pretty much spot on. I think at least for the UA buyer themselves, the campaign manager themselves, it's really important that they care. I know that sounds like a very strange thing, but it's a lot of the math that a basic campaign manager doing is not rocket science. You know, the LTV predictive stuff gets a little bit more sophisticated, but in terms of just campaign management, it's just some pretty simple metrics that they're looking at, and they need to care that those metrics are good or bad, and they need to care for a long time. So keeping a UA manager engaged is similar to like keeping a trader engaged. It can be a kind of relentless pursuit of optimizing CPI or ROAS or whatever this metric is. So we look at kind of mainly culture is like, do they care? And so, you know, we test basic mathematics. We give them a kind of a simulation when they come in, which is not super difficult, but it's simple enough that they need to understand, and they need to be able to kind of pull out insights from a pretty simple set of data. Yeah.
When some time passed by, how do you know they're good?
They bring in profitable users.
Yeah, I think ultimately that they're bringing in profitable users. I think also when you're comparing an internal team to an outsourced agency is often a good way. So depending on the scale of your budget, setting aside 5 or 10% and pushing it to an agency can be a good way of benchmarking your internal team's performance. I think the difficulty is that Facebook, Google, these algorithms are getting so sophisticated that it's actually about minimizing errors and minimizing wasted spend. So, you know, if you find campaigns in specific geos or specific creatives that are a complete waste of time, and you as the manager can find them before the campaign manager, then that's obviously a really bad sign.
I think first of all, you have to have a really good company culture to support creativity in people. Some companies are asking employees to do one single job. If you provide that kind of information for that job, they should be able to come up with creative solutions. Laziness for an employee is quite important, so they can come up with automation solutions. If you support a person enough with data and time, they will come up with really good solutions. But to be best, you have to push people towards that.
Yeah, on top of what all the gentlemen just said, I think being a UA manager, you have to have a really open mind of willing to keep learning, because UA change so fast every single day, every single month. Maybe there was some new technology just come up, so you have to really willing to learn and also monitoring the industry's trend very closely, and then also you have to be good at numbers. Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things as a UA manager. So combine and also have an eagle eye to the creatives, knowing what will work, what will not work. A lot of people are saying you have to do A/B tests all the time. But for me, if you really accumulate enough experience and you really want to educate yourself and then watch as much as ads as you can and really try to learn what kind of trend is the most effective one. Actually, sometimes you don't really need A/B tests. You will know if it works or not. So I think as a UA manager, you have to keep learning and keep try to educate yourself. I think that's the role for UA.
You mentioned technologies and tools, ways of learning. Can you share examples of ways you utilize it for your own activity?
Yes. Yeah. For example, a lot of small developer reach to us. Sometimes will say, "I don't have enough budget. What do? I cannot afford to buy very fancy BI things. So what can I do?" Actually, there are a lot of free tools or free platform. As long as you know where to find them, you can use them. For example, Google, Facebook, ad library. Ad library, you can see all your competitors' creatives. UA, as long as they're buying at the moment on certain geo. Yeah, so you will see everything. So you don't really need to buy a very fancy BI to know what kind of ad they're running. You just go there and then just need time and research and watch. Then you will know. Yeah, I think this is one of the best tools. Even we are using it because you can see everything.
So we last years, we created a creative dashboard for ourselves, which we are analyzing every aspect of a video. So we are using an ID for each creative, which is same 6-digit code. If you put the you can aggregate the data. So we are attributing every aspect of that video to that ID and analyzing it. So what we realized was we have a really good concept called camp cleaning, which we are using almost everywhere. What we realized was in different geos, for example, Japan, they were buying on the store, they were buying specialized items. They were spending for specialized items most of the gems. So we start putting those items on those videos for geo specifically, and IPM, even IPM and the ROAS increased, and that was a quite success for us. So my colleagues are here. They always come up with new ideas for these tools, and we are always updating our tools to reach better data and to have more time to think about creatives.
I guess we're on a Bidalgo panel, so I should probably plug the creative dashboard. You know, I'd say the attribution providers, there's a bit of a hole here in terms of creative performance review. So unless you're tagging specific assets and you're really methodical about having that tag on Facebook and on Google, sometimes your attribution provider is not giving you that level of performance that you really need. So yeah, a creative dashboard across channels, across geos is super important.
We use a mix of third-party software and internally developed technology together. So attribution is important. Obviously, we use Apps Flyer for that. We need to have very quick access to spend data, so we use Singular for that. But we have our own internal platform we're calling Lighthouse to do campaign management. So setting bids and having warnings when we exceed a particular CPI on a particular platform. It's allowed our buyers on Facebook and Google, which are the two largest spends that we have, to consolidate and minimize the amount of time spent per UA manager. It's been a really important tool for us to be fast. Speed was brought up earlier. I think speed's super important. Having good reliability on your own LTV predictions and curves, such that you can look at very small windows in time and make quick decisions that can allow you to out-optimize your competition. So we invest heavily into data science. We've got several very smart folks that do things I don't even comprehend, that give us these models that are highly predictive and have allowed our kind of people even above me to be very trustworthy in us spending more money, even though they haven't made their money back yet, with the vision that someday they will. And so that's a really weird thing that we live in now, but that's how you do really well done UA.
And before we go to Q&A, one last tip for us, for developers who are in their early days.
We've talked a lot about creative, so Facebook is the best platform to test creative, in my opinion. Google, it's somewhat too sensitive. You add a creative in there, you can throw off your whole campaign performance kind of daily. So if I was a small company, I wanted to test a concept, I would first focus on just the game mechanic. Ignore everything else, just a screen recording of the most fun part of the game mechanic and test those game mechanics on Facebook. That would be my suggestion.
So on early stages, deconstructing your success is the key, because you mix art and science, what they mean, on early stages quite a lot. When you first got the success, you don't deconstruct it really good, and you don't understand why you are successful. So having to be able to replicate it, any success, you have to deconstruct it really well. You need BI tools for that, so we can come up with the good ideas again. So
for me, I think I would just mention that again about think about what's your unique selling point, because a lot of small developers, when they approach to us, they didn't really think through about this. They just told us, I have a super fun game, super interesting. Yeah, but what's the unique selling point, and also what's your position to the competitors? Because once you have your unique selling point, then your UA creatives can base on this idea and then to spread out to have more ideas based on this unique selling point. And then you need to work very close to your data team, because they will give you the best information about how to optimize everything, and then also you have to have tracking attribution tools. I think that's very important nowadays for UA, and also creative analysis. A lot of people forget to do creative analysis. They just think this click-through rate is low and this is high, and then just give up the low one. But try to dig in more. Maybe you can just fix something. Maybe it's just too long, the video. Make it shorter or make it more live action nowadays is very popular as well. Yeah, just change the format a little bit. Maybe the same concept can bring you different results.
Yeah, probably the biggest learning is to simplify what you're optimizing towards. For Marvel Strikeforce, it is purely yield. And so build everything around that to maximize your ability to be confident that you're buying profitable players in this case. If it's something different, if you've got a different game, maybe you've got in-game ads, and it isn't necessarily just about return on investment, then figure out what that one main KPI is and use everything else as guides towards that one KPI.
Thanks, guys, for sharing the experience, knowledge, and insight. I think we're now ready for the Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Veronica, and thanks a lot for this panel. It was very interesting to listen to you. And I have a question to Nasrin, and maybe for you also, guys. You mentioned a Japanese market, and maybe you can comment a bit more about this market, because it's really something different from all other world. What are the best practices, and what is the strategy to gain these users? I mean, Japanese users. Thank you.
For Japan, it's a very, very unique market in Asia. They have because their internal, their game developing was like so early. They have like a Nintendo and this kind of history there. So they're kind of close up. So for Western, especially Western developers, might be quite difficult to really get in. So first of all, I would suggest if you can try to see the competitors' app store screenshot first to see how they present the screenshot. You really find so different from the Western style, because the Western style usually you have a very nice peaceful art aesthetic there, and then with a banner saying go play with your friend. That's it, right? But for Japan, no. You have to have a lot of fires, a lot of like powers, or even like dragons or things. You need to find a localized what the Japanese people like. For example, they like gacha a lot. Like the gacha means like the kind of mechanism, yeah, and then you just how do you say that? Like twist, and there will be something fall down. This kind of mechanism, like free gift. If you have this kind of similar mechanism in your game, that'll be great. Means they can get free stuffs, and they like this kind of, especially a surprise. Yeah, so you can put that into your creatives, especially like App Store screenshot and also videos. And another thing is try to do some investigation about their festivals. They have tons of holidays and festivals, and they like to have very localized theme. For example, they have twice of Valentine's Day. Yeah, they need to deal with that. Yeah, so like twice, you know. So February 1st, February 14th, first one, which is the girls need to give the chocolate to boys, not the other way around. And the March 14th is the boys need to give chocolate to girls. So that's the cultural difference from here. So if you know this, maybe you can, when you're doing some promotion or something, yeah, you can specifically say, hey, you can gift your boyfriend or something on the 14th of February, but when March or February, you do the other way around. Hey, give your girlfriend something. They'll feel much more close. And another thing is for localization. We saw a lot of localization. I mean, for banners and things, they just directly translate from a Western thing like play with your friend. That's it. And then in Japanese, yeah, asobi. Yeah, like with your tomodachi, yeah, something like that. But the thing is, you have to really, really localize. You need to make it feel fun. So you might need to say something more like play with your friends and then get some super prize, something like that. Make it more engaged. Yeah, I think that's very important thing for Japanese culture. They really like to be more involved and feel the human feeling there. So, and also the art style is very important, and the color of tone is also very important. There, sometimes for hyper casual game, they like more softer color, not as bright as like Chinese game. If you compare of those colors, you can really feel the color tones are different as well. So try to see if you have some common element for these two markets. I think that can definitely benefit to your games.
So we're actually pretty large in Japan, surprisingly, but we found the user behavior, user experience is really different. So the session times, the retention curves, the monetization, everything is actually how they play the game is like fundamentally different, I guess, on top of all of the localization and creative.
Yeah, we have the same on ad-based title. They usually, Japanese players, Chinese players, Korean players, they consume the content quite fast, faster than the other countries. So on ad-based titles, you see lower retention, higher session numbers. Usually your DAUs are quite high, but lifetime is like 2-3 days shorter. On IAP titles, their spend curve is more front-loaded. They consume the content much faster and spend all the money where they're going to spend. So you have to have higher yield targets. For Japan, something funny, payday is the best day. So at the beginning of the month, you will see really good yields on your campaigns. Just be careful about it.
Yeah, I'd add one thing that we've had, and I've had in prior roles success with, is don't underestimate the device differences. So Sony is a huge handset manufacturer in Japan, much bigger than the rest of the world. And so when you think about the ability to do pre-installs or co-op deals with handset manufacturers, they work very well in Japan.
Thanks very much for your time. That was a great panel. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.